Well, hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to one of our town halls for the Catholic Prison Ministries Coalition. I am Joe Cotton, one of the executive coordinators, along with Karen Clifton for CPMC. And so we're delighted to see all of you and to gather with our incredible community across the US. We are delighted today to feature Kairos Prison Ministry International, which is a ministry that has been around for a very long time, has served an enormous amount of people in a really beautiful and profound way. And so we are excited to kind of lift up this ministry today to be able to learn more about it and to kind of gain some best practices from their ministry, but also to really celebrate it, to celebrate the impact that this ministry has made across the United States and really the world. So as you may somehow, where did I leave off? Somehow it auto muted me.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. So again, lay-led interdenominational Christian ministry that demonstrates the love and forgiveness of Jesus Christ through a weekend experience. Following the initial event, guests or participants gather regularly for accountability, support, and prayer. Though Christian in nature, no religious affiliation is necessary to be a participant. So that's just a brief description, general overview of Kairos Prison Ministry. But we are delighted today to have with us Evelyn Lemley, who is the CEO of Kairos Prison Ministry International. She's coming to us today from Florida. She has been a catalyst for positive change since January 2013. She embraces a vision and makes it a reality through her sound decision-making. And under her leadership, the ministry currently serves in over 500 institutions and communities throughout the world, sharing God's love and forgiveness to all those affected by incarceration. Evelyn, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I will turn it over to you to share with us about the amazing ministry of Kairos.
All right. Well, thank you, Joe. It's an honor to be here, and thank you, everyone, for joining in. So what a privilege when you get to talk about the ministry you love and have been working in. All of you know how that feels. I know when you get an opportunity to share what God is doing and what little part we get to play in that. So that's what we're honored to do. So Joe, if you want to throw up the slides, we'll just get started. I just want to walk you through a couple of things, educate you a little bit, and I think at the end we'll have an opportunity for questions. Excuse me. If you heard Joe, he said I was in Florida, and Florida is an awesome place to live. There's a few negatives. Hurricanes would be one, but one negative is there's pollens 12 months a year. So I seem to always be a little bit congested from that. So my apologies for maybe that happening. So let me apologize for that up front. So Joe, if you'll go ahead and go to the next slide, we'll get started into this. As Joe goes there, I was as he said, I've been in Kairos now for 9 years as the leader, and what an honor and a privilege to be a part of what's going on, and hopefully you'll get a little flavor for that here as I talk a little bit. Joe shared just a little bit. Our core focus, our mission, is to share the transforming love and forgiveness of Jesus Christ to those impacted by incarceration. That's whether it's men that are in prisons, women that are in prisons, youth and juvenile facilities or adult facilities, as well as their families, because we have a program that actually works with the women of the incarcerated that are on the outside. And the whole goal is to actually help them go through a transformational process to change behaviors from where they are. And you can imagine where people may be when they're in prison. They're probably not in the place that they need to be with, first of all, the Lord, and second of all, in how they're walking. And I'll use walking in a generic way there. And so we can move on, Joe, and I'll talk just a little bit general, and then I'll get into a few more details. We are in, well, currently we're in about 526 locations. We just say 500 plus because it's always moving around. We have roughly 30,000 volunteers around the world that's working, and we do all of that with 10 staff, 10 paid people around the world that operates, and in the 10 countries. And we're in Latin America, South Africa, the UK, Northern Ireland, Australia, Canada, the US, and scattered around. And the really neat thing is that we have a lot of opportunities to grow into other countries. And we're actually working on some of that right now, where we're being asked to come into countries and do more ministry, especially in Latin America and Africa. So the expansion opportunity is awesome. As God opens those doors, we trust that He'll provide the resources. Our number one resource, by the way, is people. As you can see with the 30,000 volunteers, our greatest need is people willing to serve and to be the hands and feet of Jesus to carry in His message and who we are. We're a very structured program, and that's needed not only for the environment that we work in, but it's also needed in order to take people through the process that we take them through. So it's not we are not a ministry that just goes in and shares the message. We actually come back. We're known as the ministry who comes back, and does that. So basically what we do is we surround each prison or each youth facility with a group of volunteers that live in that general area, and they're the ones responsible then to carry out the program and implement it. So that same group of people is always adding volunteers and going in, and they go in and carry the program in an organized fashion into that prison. And so there's a connection and a relationship from the local community of Kairos volunteers to that prison and facility that we're working in. So it is a very grounds up, lay-led ministry. We do have pastors that serve in the ministry in various ways because we always want a spiritual director. And we are interdenominational, or some would call it ecumenical, but it is Christian. Okay, so we teach Christian principles in there. So all of our volunteers are Christian. And so that's our requirement, but anyone then can participate in the program of whatever belief. We have everybody from Wiccans to Muslims to atheists to Buddhists to you name it, cult leaders to everything you can imagine from the prison standpoint that attends our weekends. And our job is to share Jesus Christ with them. And so that's where we do that. And we have great success. Part of that success, as measured in the Department of Corrections world that we work in, and that CPMC now is working in, is you look at part of the impact of do they recidivate. And so we have data from all over the country that will show that if someone has gone through the Kairos program and participated in it, that on average, it will be a 50% reduction in recidivism for what that state is. So let me put that in a different term. If that state's recidivism rate is 50%, the Kairos graduates' average rate would be 25%. So it's cut by 50% of whatever that state is. And so every state measures that a little differently, and that's why we sort of phrase it that way. So it's a very impactful program, totally free to the facilities and to the participants. We pay for everything by raising funds and supporting it from a local basis. So Joe, if you'd go on. I wanted to cover a little bit of the history because it has a direct tie to Catholic, basically. We did begin in 1976 in one prison in Florida, and they called it a short course in Christianity, otherwise known as Cursillo in Prison. And all of you probably know what Cursillo is all about. And it came about because our founder, Tom Johnson, went through Cursillo, and he was a criminal attorney. And so he was putting people into prisons. And he said, after going through Cursillo, he's like, I got to do something to help these people that are in these prisons. And so he had this dream to do something similar to that, more directed and targeted at their needs than maybe what we on the outside needed, like through Cursillo, and taking it in. So he started working diligently and finally got into a Florida in prison. Or into a prison in Florida at Union Correctional, which was one of the hardest prisons in the state at the time, and was able to do an event, a weekend, and that's where it started. His dream was to be in one prison. That was the dream. Now, 45 years later, we're in 500 and some, 37 countries, 37 states, 10 countries, and growing, and have 3 distinct programs out of this, which I'll talk about in a minute. So from that little dream of a seed that got planted from the Catholic Cursillo to grow into a major impact, just continues to show us how one individual can make a profound difference just by being obedient to what God puts on their heart. And I think our founder is a great example of that. In 1979, we were established as a standalone type entity, and that's when we became known as Kairos Prison Ministry. And they chose the word Kairos because it means God's special time. And so taking them through that. And so there was a group of men that sort of put it together and got all the structure and everything. So that's sort of how we started, but it has a foundation from the Catholic Cursillo movement that was started by Eduardo Bonin several years ago. So 45 years old and still running strong. So that's, we definitely have a history of success and impact and just serving our Lord. So go ahead. Let me tell you just a little bit about our 3 programs. We have 3 very distinct programs, but they all have a similar structure. The structure is weekend event, being 3 or 4 to 2 to 3 days, sort of depending on how that goes. And then we come back, preferably weekly, monthly, every 6 weeks. Then you repeat the weekend, weekly, monthly, much as a Cursillo format there. So Kairos Insight is our program that we take inside the prison, men and women's prisons, adult facilities. And so we hold an event where we bring people together and we take them on this journey that walks them through a dynamics of, it starts with who we are as people, because the first thing we need to do is win trust, right? And credibility. Then we talk about them and breaking down walls and barriers and bringing it into a conversation. And then we move it into sharing about Jesus Christ and that there is hope and love. And then we take it to a concept of community, of how you work and serve and are there to help one another. All right. So it's taken that whole concept of who we are, who they are, who Jesus is, and how do we put all of that together into a community basis. And so that's sort of the principle of all of our programs. And so the fact that we have a group of locals there, we surround them, that facility, and then on a weekly basis, they're coming back for accountability groups, and then monthly reunions, and then do weekends. So it's the repetitiveness. Continuing to increase. The difference is that after the weekend, the volunteers do the weekend. Every other event, we're asking leaders from inside the prisons to lead them. So we're actually teaching them to grow up as leaders and to start living out what they've been taught and what they've learned. So they start teaching each other, because the whole principle is we want them to be living this out when we're not there, because we can only be there every once in a while. They're there all the time. So there's sort of the principles behind it. So if you want to move on. Our second program is called Kairos Outside. And this is for the women, and it's very specifically targeted at women that are the loved ones, if you will, of those that's incarcerated. Doesn't matter whether it's a youth, a woman, or a man that's incarcerated. But if you've ever talked to someone who has a loved one that is incarcerated, you will find that they feel like they are doing time right along with the incarcerated. These are the women who are taking care of the kids or the grandkids, as it may be. It may be a sister, a mother, a daughter, an aunt, a grandmother, any of those relationships, but they are caught in this as doing time. And so they're trying to pay the bills, they're trying to take care of family events and all of that, while there's a loved one that's missing and is incarcerated, who also needs support and help. So it becomes a very, very stressful time for these women. And we also find that these women need a lot of healing from what we find is very broken relationships, very broken relationships. When someone is incarcerated that's in a family, there's usually a sense of betrayal, hurt, what did I do wrong? You know, you start naming all of those things and they start blaming themselves for what their loved one has done. And so it becomes a very hard time for them. So we also have the same structure, weekends, and then we come back, a community of other women that's surrounding them in the local community, where we try to provide a safe, loving environment for them to heal and to work with people that are in similar situations, so that they can find that hope and love of Christ and have him to lean on. Now, if you can only imagine, if someone's gone through Kairos inside and someone's gone through Kairos outside, how the unity in the family can happen, and how we heal families and bring that body together, hopefully and prayerfully in a more healthy way as we take them through that journey. So we're really trying to pair that up and get husband and wives, sometimes it's daughter, mother, and different scenarios in, so that the family unit is healed. And also what happens then is when the person comes out, they have a home and a loving environment to go to of support, which also increases their chances of success of reentry into the world. So all of those things become very important. So that's a little bit about Kairos outside in a nutshell, and it's targeted at the women of those that are incarcerated. Go ahead. Our third program is called Kairos Torch, and it's targeted at incarcerated youth ages 25 or under in both youth and adult facilities. Now, some of you may say, well, a youth is not 25 years old. But however, all of the studies show that the human brain does not fully mature until the age of 25. And we also know that anyone that is incarcerated, they stop developing mentally at the age they were incarcerated. So if you have someone that's put into prison at the age of 16, they continue to behave as a 16-year-old, even though they may be 23, just using that as an example. Why? Because they're not making decisions, and they didn't go through that youth rebellion stage that all teenagers and things go through. So, so we really do minister to that age group in that same way, because of that mentality and the maturity of the brain development. So that's part of the why, just to answer that. Same structure, weekend structure. We come back. The difference here is we do mentoring for the youth. So we train volunteers to actually do one-to-one mentoring in a group setting. And we take them through a very formal process of trying to help them think through, well, what is my life goals? What do I want to do differently here? When I get out of this facility as a youth, how can I change my trajectory so that I'm not back in here or in an adult facility? So basically what we're trying to do here is break that cycle so they don't end up in the adult facilities or in for longer period of times than what they've been incarcerated as a youth. We actually know that 70% of all youth have one or that are incarcerated have one or more of their parents have been or are currently incarcerated. So we need to break that cycle, and we break that cycle by working with them before they get into major trouble as a non-youth. We'll put it that way. So the mentoring is a very important part of helping them walk through that. So on a weekly basis, we actually go in and do the mentoring and work with them on a one-to-one basis to help them develop a plan. So that's our 3 pillars of programs that we work with that volunteers do in surround facilities and or communities. So Joe, I thought it might be good for me to stop here and maybe play a little video that would a testimony from a man, Tommy Fisher, who was in prison for many years, and let him tell you his story of impact. So would you play that for me, please? We're not seeing it, Joe, if you're playing it. You'll have to stop sharing this screen and reshare that one. Hey, Joe, there's no sound coming on my end. If I may help, only because have had the same problem. When you do the let me.
I have sound. I can hear it.
Yeah,
I don't know why it's not coming through to you.
You're when you do your share screen, there's a down at the bottom on the corner. There's I forget exactly what it says, but you got to click a little box for it to play your sound.
All right, my apologies. I thought it automatically did that. Silly me. All right, let's try this again.
I've learned that the hard way. It's the only reason I know.
My apologies, everybody. Thank you for your patience. Let me back this up here. All right, fingers crossed.
Yes.
I'm gonna tell you about Kairos, this prison ministry that comes inside them walls. It's a dead man. A lot of people say we dead men. I mean, I was just a madman. Everybody got a story. But when you really get touched by God, that's when you know you got a real story. Well, my name is Tommy Fisher. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. I grew up in the street gangs there. I I got in a lot of trouble. I ended up doing 20 years, 11 months flat in prison. I had an aggravated life sentence. I wasn't supposed to never get out. I ran the gangs in prison, and I hurt a lot of men for some crazy reasons. I used to actually get Christians beat up because they say they wanted to come to Christ. That's how crazy and radical I was. But when they pick Kairos, they only pick the worst inmates on the unit because they want the roughest dudes on the unit, the fools, to get changed. And this ministry is actually going in here and showing this love and changing people like that. I'm gonna tell you the truth, I went for their food. I didn't go to get saved, but God had set me up. When I was sitting there, man, I was listening to this dude talk. When Paul was on the road to Damascus and Jesus' presence knocked him off that horse, I know for a fact I felt the presence of the Holy Spirit. I felt it like Paul felt it. And from that day forth, man, God has just been blessing my life. While I was in that prison, I got into this Theropon Theological Seminary and Bible Institute. I got a bachelor's degree in biblical studies. I also went to college and I got me an LBT. I just thank God for God's blessing. I got a license to counsel, and I really thank God for what he changed me into because I used to be a monster. I used to really be a monster. The only reason why I don't know if I ever killed a man because I never went back and asked the man who I shot, was he dead? But I shot a lot of people and I hurt a lot of people's lives. But ministries like Kairos can go inside them walls and show a man God's love. Man, if I could tell anybody about Kairos, man, it's changing lives. Because I got to give God back what he gave me. He gave me back my life. He gave me them years that the locust stole from me. He gave them back to me.
So, Tommy's a good example of one aspect of people, the people who didn't even know Christ and are running in gangs and hurting other people and all that because that's their way of life. And one of the things when I came into prison ministry that I hadn't been in that environment. Maybe that's true of you if you haven't been in prison ministry for long or hadn't done it, but and I didn't think about it. Quite frankly, I thought, oh, well, they've done something wrong in prison, and that's where they belong. And still don't disagree that there's not a punishment and a penalty for things, but there's also an opportunity for people to change. And the problem is that so often we're putting people into prison, and what we effectively do is we teach them how to be a better criminal versus how to be a better person. And so part of our goal is to do exactly what you just heard Tommy say, is to change their perspective and to introduce them to Jesus Christ so that they see there is love and that people can love them and that they are worthy of being loved. Because a lot of these men and women and youth that are in prison are lashing out because they have no hope and they've never felt love in their life. And we all know that having the love of Jesus Christ can change everything. Every perspective, every aspect of your life can dramatically change because of him. And we get to be the hands and feet that carry that out, that they get to feel it and see it and touch it. And sometimes it is a simple, he mentioned food. We carry food in. If they allow us homemade food, if not, we'll take in pizzas. We don't care because it's a time of fellowship. How many problems have been solved because we actually have fellowship with someone over food, right? Very biblical process too. So we try to do everything that we can to fill basic needs, which includes human hunger, and take them all the way up to a spiritual, and take them to that level to where they can hear us and that they understand it. And we don't have to do the work then of Jesus. He does his job of showing up. And as Tommy said, I felt the Holy Spirit there. So, that's what we're doing. We have, like I said earlier, gang leaders, we have non-believers, we have other believers from other religions that come in, But the point is, we're being the hands and feet of Jesus and then trying to share him to others. And that's our goal, share the transforming love and forgiveness of Jesus Christ. But it is, as I said earlier, it's a very formal process. It's not a loose, go in and do whatever you want to do. We have a very specific way that we do it, tried and true, that we know has impact. And so we train volunteers, and then we form teams, and they go in and they carry it out. And one of the keys is of volunteers and what makes this work is the personal side of it. It's not only the actual tangible part of a person walking in and caring, because, I mean, these men and women and youth are going, well, these people don't have to come in here and spend this day with me or this weekend and keep coming back. So just that action alone goes a long way to expressing the love and making them feel like they matter because we're giving them time. And how many of us, if we know we're loved because our family or someone else gives us time. It's a total expression of illustrating God's love. It's just by time. And then the fact that we try to take food in and that we're walking them through things. And after every talk and thing that happens, there's a practical illustration of a hands-on discussion about it, whether it's making a poster or talking it through or whatever it may be, in order for them to practically apply what we've been teaching them in every step of the way to their life and where they're going. And so it just keeps building on each other. And so that extension of being the hands and feet, being present, showing them that they're worthy of something, and then taking the time to walk them through it. And people share their own testimonies of how they're struggled. It may be due to crisis of loss or lost my job or whatever the cases may be, or got in trouble or they're sick. And it's that vulnerability of sharing our own stories and showing them that we're just like them, they're just in a different place. So it's really just such a profound thing of trying to change people and through that introduction of Christ. So Joe, if you go to the next one. I can't help but say to all of you of how can people get involved? Well, there's many ways. You can join us into a communities of actually going into the prisons, becoming a team member and participating by going into male or female prisons. We only take men into men's prison and women into women's prisons. Working with the youth and helping us with mentoring them and changing the trajectory of their life, or working with the women outside. To actually work that out. So I'm not sure why he can't hear me. I'm not muted. Can everyone else hear me? Okay, I hear some heads nodding, yes. So I'm not sure there. I just saw a chat coming up. So there's ways to get involved. And then of course, because we're a nonprofit, we look for donations so people can get involved by giving. So there's an active way of participating in the ministry, supporting the ministry. And then Joe, if you'd go to the next one for me. And then there's a multitude of other ways. One of the things is I mentioned food. We have teams that prepare food. We are sort of known as the cookie ministry. We take fresh baked cookies or packaged cookies if they won't let us take them in, but we prefer to bake them, to take them in. And we've been doing huge campaigns of cookie ministries during COVID and carrying in dozens and dozens of cookies for the workers, the employees, and the entire prison during COVID, all across the country and world for that matter. And Just in what we do in those cases, we put scripture verses in every bag and things and hand them out. So it's just an encouragement, reminding them that we're still there and we're still cared about and we can't wait to get back and things of that nature. But we're passing them out to everybody. So if there's 3,000 men in this men's facility and there's 1,000 employees, everybody gets a bag of cookies. So you can imagine the impact that that might have on people. But during our normal course, non-COVID times, whatever that means in the future, we take as many cookies in as the facility will allow us and use them as our part of a ministry and as a part of giving somebody a treat and something. And you can only imagine if you've been in prison, you probably haven't had a homemade cookie in a while. So it is a true treat. There's way, and so we're always looking for help there. Creating agape, I want to spend just a second on that, because if some of you are leaders in a church, we place agape and we love, right? We all know that is, and it's just it's a way for the community to be involved without being present, right? And so it's making posters and banners, and we have youth groups and children's ministries and school. Sometimes there'll be second and third grade school projects that they will make placemats for us, which is the little paper placemats, and they just decorate them and do it. And so when we're serving a meal, we'll lay it down at each of them. And so here's a poster of, Justin, age 8, drew and says, God loves you and stuff. And it's just a treat for these men and women to get something from the outside. And they see the church, they see the people of God surrounding them in so many different ways. Here's food, here's homemade cookies, here's people sending in posters for the wall and signing their name on it and said, we're praying for you. We have prayer chains that we use so that, sometimes they wrap around the room 10 times and they see all of these people are praying for us right now. And so it's just the church at work, if you will, and embodying that whole body. So there may be 40 people that got to go in, but there's thousands others that's surrounding it. And they're displayed on the wall and through prayer, because we share, here's all the people who's praying for you right now. And it makes a huge impact. And getting the kids involved by them making posters, whatever, that innocence of a kid and the impact that has. So we have school age, and we have, the Sunday school groups and whatever, what all the right titles, the school groups and all of that involved in helping make some of that. And then adults doing that. And then, of course, there's the opportunity to pray. So I wanted to highlight that there's more ways to get involved, because some people say, I'm not comfortable going into a facility, or I'm not physically able, or different things, but they can certainly sign up for prayer, and they can certainly do other things. Someone asked, how were we funded? We're funded by donations. We raise the funds locally. And nationally, we do campaigns from the international office to help raise and fund. But the local team will actually go out and raise the funds in order to fund the food and the supplies and the needs that they have for that particular event that they are doing, whether it's a weekend or a reunion. Our biggest cost is probably food. We get a lot of donated food too. Things like Chick-fil-A will donate a sandwich to us and things of that nature. Local restaurants and or food places will donate things. So it's a mixture of things, but we do raise our funds all locally and self-fund all the events. So that's how we raise funds, but just by general donations. Churches give to us and support us. And individuals, we have a lot of Christian businesses that will help give, again, either goods and or funds. How is the REC program similar? It is similar. I think the REC program is very in structure anyway. I don't know the content of REC, so I can't address content. I think I've seen the program a couple of times. But of course, REC is very Catholic targeted, and they're in a few, I don't know how many prisons they are, but in concept, it is a somewhat similar program. But very focused on the Catholic. Kairos includes Catholics, Protestants, just so long you're believers as a Christian. That's our rule, right? And we do require people to sign, our statement of faith, which basically says, believe in the Bible, the Trinity, and the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. So it's the basic tenets of all Christians. I summarized that very quickly, by the way. Yeah. Okay. So, are there any more questions or things, I think that was about my 40 minutes there, but I answered a couple of questions too, Joe, if you want to open it up. I do invite anyone to contact us if you're interested in your area. We are in 37 states, which is where the majority of the prisons are. We're missing a couple of states that's got quite a few in them. Sometimes we've been in that state and for different reasons we're not there. But we're continuing to grow, continuing opportunities. And let me give you an example of opportunities. I'm going to use Kairos Torch, our youth program. We need volunteers. We have 100 youth facilities on our list right now today that we could open tomorrow if we had the people to do it, scattered across the US. So, that basically means if you take 100 and you say, youth facilities tend to be very small, by the way. Some of them may have as little as 25 people in them, and some may have as many as 750 in them, but they're not the same size as prisons. Thank goodness, by the way. But if you just say there's 25 people in 100, that's 2,500 youth that we could make an impact on tomorrow if we had the people to do it. So the opportunities are there. We probably have roughly, right now on our list, there's another 50 adult prisons that we could walk in the door right now. It's just we need the people. And then our Kairos Outside program, there is no limitations by access. So we continue to expand that program. So the opportunity to serve is great. And the opportunities there is great. From a participant, I think, that one went away before I got it read. Hang on, let me pull up the chats here. From a participant, I think you should explain staying in the riverbanks as far as what we share in Kairos. If I understand that question, right? Riverbanks, we call the riverbanks sort of stay in the rules, what our rules are and things, and so we call it riverbanks. Sometimes the river's really wide, so you got a lot of flexibility, and you can go and you can move around a whole lot in your, I'll call it in your boat, and go on that. And then there's other times when it's very narrow, depending on what we're doing and what we're sharing. And we're very, very strict on confidentiality of exposing people and stories they tell and protecting. And while we very clearly can talk about Kairos and what we do and how we do it and people's stories with their permission, we always want to protect that. But at the same time, as I said, we're a pretty structured program. And so, we do this and we go in order and we do it in the right way because it builds on one another. And if you start, getting it out of order and making up your own things, it sort of messes up the program. And so we have a saying of stay in the riverbanks. And so the question is based on that of we stay in the riverbanks, and each of the program has sort of guidelines of staying in the riverbanks. And part of it too is we always have to be true not only to our own program, but we're disciplined by the Department of Corrections because we have to follow their rules, obviously, because we're a guest in their house, if you will. How do we publicize? Probably in the normal ways that everybody does. Word of mouth is huge. We do a lot of presentations in churches. So if you're in a church and you would like a presentation, we'll get local people to go do that. So it's locals talking to you from what's there. We do things like this. This is publicizing Kairos right here, of sharing about what we do and interacting and in communicating with people. We don't do television ads. We do some radio ads scattered around, but those are a lot of local, but a lot of it is word of mouth and demand, but most of it is working with churches of all denominations. And just a friend asking a friend, come join me. That's really how it's publicized and how it grows, because they went, once someone is a part of it and they're impacted, then they want to share it with somebody else and say, you need to come join us, because you really are, you know, as we say, you've got a front seat to watching God at work, to God's miracles at work. You see the Tommy Fishers right before your eyes. You see it happening. I once was at a closing, the last day of an event, to give you an example, and we watched the in this weekend. We had them at different locations in the weekend, but at the end, the skinhead, so the white leader, and the black cult or gang leader, and I don't remember the name of that gang, but you sort of get the idea. But they were at war in the prison, and the leader of both of those gangs was in that weekend. And the leader of the black group, which I don't remember the name of the group, stood up and he said, "You come up here," and he pointed to the white gang leader. And they come up and they had their arms around each other at the end and said, "We're both declaring that the war is done." And so think about the impact on the whole prison that just had, and the change in dynamics that happened, and things. And of course, the security officers that were in the room were sort of like, "Oh, what's getting ready to happen?" And they were just ecstatic with that. What percentage of graduates attend reunions? It varies all over the country as to what percentage. I don't know that I have a magical percentage. I'm going to tell you 50% or so is probably a pretty good rule of thumb, but I don't have an exact number or the math, so to speak. But just based on feedback, I'm going to guess it's around that number. Are there other questions? Yeah, I think I've answered everything I saw there.
You have. Evelyn, can you talk a little bit about how the pandemic has affected Kairos and maybe some of the pivots that you've needed to make to kind of move forward during this really unusual time where a lot of us are limited in our prison ministry and ability to get into facilities, and just how you've navigated that?
Yeah, what a odd year for all of us in our lives, right? You can imagine what the inmates have been going through, because most of the prison went immediately into a lockdown situation. And if you don't know what that means 23 hours a day, 7 days a week in your cell. Okay, so most of them got to get out on a random basis to take a shower or to go outside for exercise about 1 hour a day. So that's what they've been living with since last March. So, but basically, obviously, all the prisons and youth facilities were closed, locked down, and so we had no access from a general. So we went into stop mode for a little while. But we've been very active in doing trainings for volunteers. I mentioned earlier, we've done a huge amount of cookies, taking them in. we've been able to do things such as, I'll call it fence reunions, in some of the states where we've had volunteers outside the fence and inmates inside the fence. And so we could talk through that. And so while we couldn't be with them, literally, it was a way to, carry out. So we've gotten pretty creative with some of the things. We've done health packages. We've had prayer events in the parking lots of prisons, and the administration would allow inmates, whether they were Kairos graduates or not, in some of the locations, come out into the yard and hear it, because we would broadcast it. They've asked us to come and surround the prison and sing, and so we've done that. We've done drive-bys with the honking the horns and the signs out and all that, sort of like the drive-by birthday parties, that you've had at different times. So we've gotten very creative of how to stay in touch with the prisons and dialogue. And at the same time, I've been doing extensive training and set up some new trainings using the fact that we now have Zoom and readily accessible, doing a lot more virtual type trainings. We held our annual conference all virtually last year. It will be live this year, but so it was really just figuring out how to keep ourselves engaged, how to keep in touch with the facilities we serve and the people that we serve as much as they would allow us. And then trying to keep ourselves going so that we were prepared to open up. One of the things that I'm finding is as the states open, excuse me, and as the prisons open, it's happening very quickly. We're getting 2 weeks notice that you can come back in. So it's a very important thing that we're staying engaged. There's quite a few of the there's about 5 or 6 states that's open where you can take people in now. And there's about 5 or 6 more that's in June here will open. And then there's 5 or 6 more that's planning July. And so it's coming where I think about all of them will be open probably by September standpoint, give or take. That may not be an exact, but that's a rule of thumb because it's not exact.
That's fantastic. Raymond was curious if there was a correlation between the 50% that attend reunions, if there's a correlation there with the 50% that don't recidivate, and what your thoughts are about that.
That's a great question. I wish I knew the answer to that exactly. That's one of those, man, would I like to know that. We know this. There was a study done in Florida several years ago that the recidivism rate for those who attended the weekend was cut in half. Then the recidivism rate for those who attended the weekend plus the continuing ministry, which is what we call it, i.e. the prayer and share and the reunions, was cut down to less than 10%. Okay, so it was cut again. And so, in fact, if I remember the numbers, and I don't have it right here in front of me, it was cut like from the state rate, actually we used that prisons rate, to attending a weekend was cut 45%. And then it was cut again, another 45% if they attended a reunion. So I think there may be a correlation, but I don't think it's a direct correlation, because actually when they attend a reunion, when they do our prayer and share, in other words, when they come back and keep joining us, we actually see that recidivism in every study that we have, it drops to single digits, less than 10%. So I think it's an even greater impact than the 50% when they actually do continue. So, but I don't have, I can't say it's 30% correlated and all that. I know it all is correlated, but I don't have a way to match those two numbers perfectly.
Thank you. Well, we've got a few minutes left. If there's other questions, I also know there's some other folks on the call. I know Dave is with us and has been involved in Kairos. I know John has been involved. I'm curious if others have an experience of briefly sharing kind of their experience of engaging with this, to feel free to chime in, or if there's other questions or comments, feel free to unmute and jump in.
When you and I met about 3 years ago in the state of Washington, we visited with the, I forget the gentleman's name. He was the warden, but I've since moved to California. I'm volunteering now at California State Prison. But the Kairos ministry is fantastic, and I've probably seen the Tommy Fisher video 200 times, and every time I see it, my eyes still tear up. It's a fantastic ministry, and you feel the Holy Spirit not only in the meetings, but in the fellowship with the other volunteers when you train for the events.
Thank you so much. That's awesome. Patricia, did you have anything? I saw your mute pop off. Feel free to dive in. That might have been inadvertent. Anyone else? Any other questions for Evelyn or your own experience of Kairos? All right. Well, Evelyn, I just want to share our deepest appreciation to you for your leadership for this organization for so long, but also for your role in the overall impact. And I agree with David, the video hits you in a profound way where you really see, there's the kingdom of God. Boom, right there. And I see that as being at the heart of what Kairos is able to create as an opportunity to encounter love at that level in God's special time, and then the unbelievable transformation of hearts that becomes possible when you encounter love like that. And so for Kairos to be able to create that opportunity for the Holy Spirit to do what the Holy Spirit does, and then the broader impact to the rest of the world, is astonishing. And just on behalf of our CPMC community, thank you for your work. Thank you for sharing with us today. And we please be assured of our prayers as you continue forward. And by all means, I threw the Kairos website in the chat, so please visit the website, donate to their ministries, get involved. They have chapters all over the place, so there's ways for you to get involved locally. And we appreciate that.
Thank you for the opportunity. I did see one question pop up there about impact on volunteers. I don't specifically have stats. It's more anecdotal, i.e. testimonies. I will tell you that I've never met a volunteer that hasn't told me that Kairos changed their life too. Because they got to see God at work before their very eyes and be a part of it. But we have people all the time that said, anything from I was a baby Christian to now I'm more mature, to just how the fellowship, and I think David even mentioned it, the working in the team impact, and how brothers and sisters impact you during that time, during the training and the preparation, and then there's the impact of doing. So I think it's all of those things before, but I can say without a shadow of a doubt, I've never talked to a volunteer who hasn't told me that it has not positively impacted, including those who said, this is not the ministry for me, but man, that impacted me. We've even had those comments from people. Because some people weren't comfortable doing it, but they still said it was profound. And I think that's true anytime, God shows up, that we know God's present, we're going to be changed. That's just the way I'd sum it. We don't do it. It's just because we're doing his work. So that would be my response to that question. I wish I had data on some of this stuff, but I don't know how to measure that. Does anybody know how to measure transformation by God and people? I hadn't figured that one out. If you know how, would you give me a call? I mean, other than anecdotal that you see it. I mean, I know I've changed dramatically by being here. And I felt like I was a decent Christian. I still am just a decent Christian. I wish I would quit all that sinning stuff. But at the same time, I've just grown leaps and bounds by experiencing what he's done in this ministry. So it's just, I think it's transformational all the way around, but I think it's God that's doing it. We get to be the conduit to it.
That's wonderful. Evelyn, thank you so much for being with us today. I appreciate your sharing. By virtue of a quick commercials, we have things coming up that we'd love for you to participate in. Coming up next week on Wednesday, June 9th at 10 Pacific, noon Central, and 1 Eastern. We'll have our monthly webinar. And I get to share a little bit at that one. So it will be Franchelle Lee, who is the Director of Youth Services for the Archdiocese of Galveston, Houston, who runs a very comprehensive set of youth programs in their juvenile facilities out of that archdiocese. And then myself joining forces to share about the nuances of juvenile ministry. And that was my world before I got into working for the Archdiocese and now working with CPMC. That was what I did, is I was a juvenile detention chaplain out here in the Archdiocese of Seattle, both in one of our county detention facilities and in one of our youth state-operated prison facilities. So just sharing some of our stories and experiences and some of the kind of particularities of working with juveniles. So please join us for that. And then later on Thursday, June 17th, same time frame, we have a reentry ministry out of Hawaii. And these folks are going to be getting up at 7 a.m. their time to join us to share about one of their reentry programs out of Hawaii. So please join us for that. We have lots of exciting things. Please keep visiting the CPMC website and looking to see what's on there and accessing resources. Please share about the opportunity to list ministries on our site and talk to people that you know who might be running a ministry somewhere. Make sure they get that ministry listed on our site so that we can grow our Catholic Yelp, if you will, of all the amazing ministries that are out there. Thank you to all of you for being a part of our CPMC community, and we'll look forward to seeing you again. And Evelyn, again, our prayers are with you. Thanks and God bless. Thanks, everybody.